Okay, Facebook is happy with our source. So we are recording for YouTube at the moment.
Oh, okay.
YouTube is always first.
Uh-huh.
Let me make sure if we're recording on YouTube.
Have we been recording yet?
No, I always announce when we start recording.
Oh, good.
You know.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yep.
Okay, so we're recording on YouTube now, but not on Facebook. Okay, now you can tell the people we got the button ready on Facebook saying we're ready when you're ready.
Okay, very good. Okay, I've sent it to them.
So there's this competitor to YouTube called Twitch.
Right.
Boy, do they have it down. I wouldn't be surprised if they overtake Facebook.
Ah.
They don't make you jump through any hoops or anything.
Well, I'll tell you, I have a little bias against Twitch because of the way I ever first heard about it.
Oh.
Which I think was a mass murderer.
Yes, that's exactly. I see your point, because they don't really ask any questions. They don't say what's your video about. So I could see how that could happen.
Right.
Okay, we're just waiting for them to come in the room.
Yeah.
And you can see on the screen when they come in.
Okay, I'm just taking this necklace off. Oops. It's got too much going on here. Now, and both of them, maybe I should have reminded them earlier. But I
you got somebody in the waiting room.
Oh, good. There he is.
There he is.
There he is, and Deidra should be right along too. But meanwhile, we can get the cameras set up and everything.
I got the camera set up, so
good.
All I got to do.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi. Good. How about you?
Pretty good.
Well, we're just, I have to say, all of this week and next week, we have camp going on. So it makes for, let's say, a very busy time. I'm sure every time is a very busy time for you.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Well,
Vicki, do you like the way the screen is set up?
yes.
Okay,
Yep.
you ready to go on the air?
Well, we need Deidra. I think we want to wait and see and get her first. So
All right.
I know that's why I was saying about, it's more so for Deidra than for me. For me, it's, I'm at camp, but she and Vivian are directing the camp. So it's our Camp Peace Prince. We've done it for, I think this is our 15th year doing it. So it's a lot of fun. But today, as a field trip day, we went to Ganondagan, which was, the Haudenosaunee village there over near Victor. So, here. Let me just try her again. And if she doesn't come on pretty soon, we could start. I don't know if you could give us then a couple minutes, Richard. Oh, and meet Richard. So Richard, Dr. Henry Louis Taylor. Dr. Taylor is all those things that we wrote down, which is then and then some.
Hey, Richard.
Richard's our
Dr.
producer.
Taylor.
Also got Think Twice Radio, so that's where we're taping this. Although it also goes on Buff State's WBNY, too. But I don't know. I think I haven't memorized all the different things you do. So when it comes to introducing you, I'll just say this while we're waiting for Deidra, is that normally what we do is a little bit of sort of, acknowledgments about, Think Twice Radio, WBNY, then a little land acknowledgement, and even a short Ganoño, sort of that's Thanksgiving address that Indigenous people do, just sort of recognitions. And then from there, then, I'll introduce everybody, or you, and Deidra very briefly. And then we'll talk a little bit on values. And then, the basic run of show that you saw, right? From there, that it's just, I definitely want to talk about the harder we run, as that root causes thing, and some discussion there. And really, I think what we're hoping to do is talk with you a lot about what you think about the current situations in Buffalo, the status of those, the segregation, poverty, housing, the health disparities, and the Humboldt Pkwy was another one we want to squeeze in there before we lose you. We're forced to keep it just under an hour, so we'll be true to the time. And if we run over, there's a big buzzer that goes off. So I try to avoid that.
Now that sounds good.
Oh, good. Yeah, and if Deidra, and we're already, here, let me see what she just said. I think she just wrote me back. Did she? No. Oops. Yes, she did. So she should be on any second now. So I'm excited for this show. And then you saw all the places it goes. So I was just saying to Richard, I have mixed feelings about Twitch, though. I mean, the only connection I've ever heard them with is not good, Mm-hmm. And yet it's another social media avenue where people who are hearing other wrong things might hear something right, or I don't even know who goes on Twitch.
They built the platform for people who play games online, which is why they don't ask you a ton of questions when you...
Sure.
Here we go. There she is.
Great. Excellent. Hi, Deidra.
Hello.
So here, Deidra, meet Dr. Taylor, Henry Lewis, Henry, and Deidra.
Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Your sound is a little wonky. I was going to say that Henry is... I was going to say Deidra EmEl, and meet Deidra EmEl. So, and of course, I know you both have heard about each other, at the very least from me, and probably other ways too. So...
Hello, Dr. Taylor. How are you?
Pretty good. It's good to see you and meet you.
Same here. It's a pleasure. It's an honor.
Yeah, it'll be... And that's one of the things. There's so many different ways of using talking piece, and one of them is, of course, this opportunity to increase people's awareness about different things. But another of them is just for people to meet each other and make that connection. It happens all the time. We had Jillian Hainsworth on, then we had a young poet on with her. So, so she got to know him a little bit. And they said they'll get together other times. So you two needed to meet each other anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay, Facebook's ready when you're ready.
Okay. So if everyone's ready, I didn't turn my phone off yet. So that's done. And if you want any water or something before we start, just to make sure you have some, or take a swig now. Maybe I'll take a little swig now. I was telling Dr. Taylor how about camp, how busy you've been with camp, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, she's got her family at home too, so it's never a dull moment. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if everybody, just be chill. Okay. So we're ready. Okay. So I'm flicking the switch. The light is on.
Okay, when you put the clapper in front of your face, you're on the air.
Right. Thank you. Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being recorded here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, also the home of our friend and producer, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. And we thank our friends, too, at Buff State, WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station, 91.3 FM WBNY. So thank you, Buff State. And when I think of Thanksgiving, I think of our Haudenosaunee friends. I think of the fact that we are on Seneca land. I think all of us here and who are on making this recording right now are on Seneca land, and how our indigenous friends, through violence and trickery, got on smaller and smaller pieces of land, and so had so much oppression and poverty and violence. But yet, through all of that, their biggest thing is thankfulness, and starting out every event with thankfulness to the people who made it possible, the people who are here, the people who are listening in, or people who wish they would be here, and to Mother Earth and all of the plants and animals, the creatures, the different elements of the creation, and to the original instructions that were given, and to our Creator. So for all of that, for the love that brings us all together, we are thankful. So I would say Nyahweh, and then you would say Nyo. So Nyahweh.
No.
Nyo. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I am very thankful. I'm very thankful for this show that we're doing today, because we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Henry Louis Taylor, whose credentials are well known, who is the director. Well, let me see. I mean, there's so many parts of what you're doing, Dr. Taylor, that you're at the UB School of Urban and Regional Planning, a professor there in that department, as well as being director of the Center for Urban Studies, associate director of UB's Community Health Equity Research, research associate at the Medical Education and Educational Research Institute of the Jacobs School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. And I'm sure that's just a few of the things. That was as much as I could fit in. So we'll just leave it at that, and we'll keep going. So welcome, Dr. Taylor.
It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon.
Well, we're just grateful for you and for all the work you're doing. And, of course, Deidra EmEl, the fearless leader and executive director at the Western New York Peace Center. You need no introduction, but I'll still mention it for anybody who might be a new listener. Thank you, Deidra. And so we'll just start off with that little values piece that we like to do, to just sort of remind us of what we're working towards and what we're working for. And so I would just invite you in this connection. And I'd say largely our topic is really the so many areas that you're working in, Dr. Taylor. So basically, the situation in Buffalo and urban planning here, health disparities here, a lot of the research that you've done. So when we think of those issues, those equity issues, and especially for the Black community in Buffalo, so devastated by the recent massacre and everything. We'll get more into that, but I just want to say, if you want to offer a value or two that you think of in these connections.
Well, for me, everything goes back to the type of society that we're attempting to build. Mm-hmm. What is it that we're trying to do? We often hear the term Black liberation or liberating Black people, but that has to be connected with a freedom dream. And that freedom dream represents the values that you're fighting for. So if we would have to say, well, what are those values? I'm talking about a collective way of life. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about a value that connects us as people and that eschews the notions of class segregation. So it's not just about racial separation, but it's also about class separation. And the fact that we have created a society where wealth and power are embedded in separation. The American system of apartheid, and that American system of apartheid is separation by class, by race. And to me, my value, central core, calls for a collective way of life, collective work, collective responsibility. And in that sense, when we value the collective, we always remember that the collective is only as strong as its weakest link. And that causes us to be people-centered in everything that we do. And those are the core, that's the kind of core value that drives my perspective and outlook, along with my notion of love. Now, love is a word that gets thrown about all over the place, but to me, love is an unwillingness to watch human suffering without joining the fight to eliminate it. You can't say you love people and not accept the conditions that are on the East Side. One of the many people who supervise me, or at least say they supervise me, came to me once, a white guy. I'm not going to call his name because everybody would know him.
Well, people might guess, but anyway, I don't know.
But he said to me, "Why are you so angry? You scare people because you're angry." And my response, "Why aren't you angry? How can you look at the conditions on Buffalo's East Side and not be angry? How can you understand the dramatic health disparities generated by those conditions and not be angry? How can you watch the need, the suffering and dying and not be angry? So tell me, sir, how can you be so calm? And why is that smiley face on you?" He didn't know how to respond to that. But to me, that's what love is. And those are the kinds of values that I espouse and that I believe in.
Thank you so much. So beautifully put. So important. So, Deidra?
I think Dr. Taylor said it all.
Yes. Got that right.
Yeah, Ashe, amen, and so it is. I think that like you said, it has to. I like in your work, you say we have to look at the roots of the problem, and I think we're all trying to cut off the branches of all these so-called social issues And they're just, instead of social issues, they're symptoms, the disease of the tree, the disease of America, the disease of capitalism. And we must look at how to change the values of society, which changes the economic system of the society, which changes our perspective on what is our priorities in society. And so, I think the value of transformation and being able to shed those, unyielding branches, and being able to kind of start anew. I think, we have to be courageous, right? And we have to be willing to change and willing to let go of what we think just belongs to us. There are many spiritual scriptures and so on, and just practical people that says the earth belongs to everyone. Right. And how do we share it? Because we go in it at the end of our years. We don't take it with us. So how do we share it while we are here? And how do we make things more equitable, and truly show love to one another as a planet? So, yeah.
Wow. Well, between both of you, the collective, the love, the transformation, the courage, I'm so inspired. I don't know. And I would just only add, nothing needs to be added, but just to as more icing on the cake, I would only say, that collective that is the beloved community, that we love that community, that and back to what you said about love, and also truth and love, truth that Dr. King, both of those from Dr. King, that truth. And that's one of the things that we'll be doing here, and we do on Talking Peace to the best of our knowledge and ability is truth and love. With that love that is about making those changes, which also makes me think of Dr. West, and the other one is, as he puts it, which is a little shift on that same basic idea, is moral integrity and universal solidarity. So I think of your supervisor or whatever he was who said that to you. If he could be struggling and searching and trying for that moral integrity and the universal solidarity, that's what Dr. West's idea, that would be our solution if people are really emulating that, instead of, so that we're really living our values and not just saying yes, yes, and then not doing anything about it.
That's right.
So on that point, the challenge is that our values run in conflict with the values of the people who run the government and the corporations. And so they see a war existing between our values and their values. And they have no intention of allowing us just to transform this world and turn it into a place where we pay people over profits.
So what are their values? I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Their values are profits at all costs. Their value is that greed is good. Their values is that they must keep the have-nots from attempting to rob their wealth. And so they see higher taxes as the have-nots are robbing their wealth. Mm-hmm. They see a government that attempts to solve social problems as the have-nots robbing them of their wealth. Mm-hmm. They see our efforts to eliminate housing problems and issues as the have-nots robbing them of their wealth, keeping them from fighting to build more wealth on top of more wealth. You know, a friend of mine used to say, I would say to her, I love you, and she would say, I love you more. For them, they say, I have money, but I need more money. I want more money. There is never enough. And so their values and our values cannot be reconciled. I wish I could say that they could, but they could not. So when I see the conditions on the East Side, and I look at these conditions on the East Side and the far West Side, I look at them every day, every single day. And I understand that they exist because the value of those who run the city of Buffalo, those who operate the economy, are very different from the people who live in the neighborhoods and the communities.
That's right.
And the black people, the black faces in high places that sit at the dinner's table, smiling and grinning with them, they have accepted their values. And that's why I say the one thing that we've learned from all of the struggles that have taken place in Buffalo and elsewhere over the past few years is that not all black people want black liberation. And not all white people are against black liberation.
So true.
Right.
A lot of people have trouble with that. But it's true.
Well, thank you. First of all, this is already, I mean, there's so much been said to cogitate on and work on that we could almost say, well, that's, you know, it was great having you on the show. No, we're just tipping our toe into all the things that you've been working on and doing. So I want to move us into, well, first we said we were going to talk about roots of the extreme segregation and poverty in the city of Buffalo. And I want to call out especially your wonderful report, The Harder We Run, you know, where you really laid it out that it's been 30 years of virtually no progress. So what are the roots there? And then we've already, I think you've sort of set the stage to really say, you know, some of the factors on that are making that happen.
The first thing I really want to say is that once we completed the report and started to study what we had just read, produced. It wasn't about just producing it. But let's go back and look at what we've done, and let's go put this in the context of everything that we know.
Right.
And there's some things that are really critical. One of the things that stood out as we looked at the experiences of Black Buffalo, because we were saying, okay, we haven't made any progress in 30 years. Why? And especially since 27 of those years were under the rule of liberal Democrats that were highly popular in the African American community and made magnificent and wonderful speeches to Black people. And 17 of those years were under the rule of a Black mayor, who lived over on the East Side and was a part of an organization that said they were acquiring political power to use to liberate the African American people. So we wanted to know, well, if those people were in power and they felt this way, why was there no progress? Absolutely none. And of course, there was a little bump in the Black middle class, but we already knew that because William Julius Wilson had explained to us as far back as 1987 that the transition from the industrial economy to the knowledge-based economy would bump up a handful of Black middle-class folks and then snatch the remainder down into the low-wage sector of the labor market. So we knew and we anticipated that. But one of the things that conclusions that we drew from this is that the decisions that are made at the local level by these policymakers, these mayors, these council members, these individuals down on the ground at these local levels, they matter. And they matter more than what happens at the federal and at the state level. Now, obviously, we know we have to get state and federal resources, but if state and federal resources pour into local areas that are not connected to the liberation of Black people, it won't be anything. And so what we saw were billions of dollars over time diverted from the Black community and went elsewhere. So we wanted to make that clear, that it's at the local level. And I stress that because every time the mayor of the city is questioned about the lack of progress in Black America, he does the moon dance around it and away from it by attempting to deflect it by saying, well, Black people's problems flow from over hundreds of years of oppression inside of this country, and from policies at the federal levels. What's happening to Black people down here in Buffalo, they're happening to Black people everywhere. And we're doing as best we possibly can under the circumstances. That is silly talk. That is simple, silly talk, and the talk of a Black face in a high place that doesn't care about the changes that are required to improve the lives of Black people. So our starting point was to understand both the complexity of the issues and the challenges, as well as understand the importance of local policymakers and forever shadow this myth that Black people remain oppressed and exploited in 2022. Because of the existence of systemic structural forces of racism and social class inequality that have not been dismantled, and that these elements are responsible for intergenerational oppression and exploitation. And I try to tell people when they say, well, it's intergenerational poverty. No, it ain't. No, it ain't. It's intergenerational oppression and exploitation. And that we are beginning to understand the specific mechanisms that are employed to produce and reproduce this inequality and oppressive conditions under which we live. And those were powerful outcomes that came from our reflections on the harder we run, as we sought to answer the question, why is it that the harder Black people run, the farther they fall behind? That's against the laws of economic gravity. That's against the laws of American mythology. Everybody knows the harder you run, the further you go, and according to American mythology. So we're living American mythology backwards, and we wanted to try to understand why. And as we looked at it, we saw it was both complicated and uncomplicated. And that the analysis that says we are doing a root problem analysis, which was critical methodologically. Because a root, as you so beautifully said a moment ago, the root is the genesis of all these other issues. It's the mothership. And that if you ignore the root, I don't care how many trillions you spend, you won't eliminate the problem. So we put it under a microscope. And I want to make it clear that when we were asked to do this study, and they said, well, how much will you charge Dr. Taylor? I said, I don't want anybody's money. I don't want anybody to have anything to do with this study, because it wouldn't matter how much money you gave us. It wouldn't taint it. But I'm not giving that card to anybody that says the study was tilted because of X or Y. So I'm going to spend my own money. I'm going to spend my own time on this study, because I don't want anybody to be able to say, however slight the tilt was, Taylor turned this way because he got money from this group or that group or some other group. I wasn't even going to allow you to have that card in your hand. So we financed this study, ourselves. So one of the most central root problems that we saw was substandard housing, which is characterized by rent gouging and unhealthy homes. And this is on top of the racial residential segregation paradigm. And, I'll just say a little bit about that. The racial segregation paradigm is a crucial linchpin because it creates the conditionality that makes the oppression and exploitation of Black people possible. And it does it in a very clever way of creating spaces that Black people cannot escape from because of the rent gaps. And because they're stuck in these spaces, it makes it possible for predatory forms of investment to occur. And there's a lot of misnomer going around. Like people will say that, oh, they're disinvesting on the East Side. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're not disinvesting on the East Side. They're engaged in predatory investment. Predatory investment. Now, I'm saying that to say there are two types of investments. There's developmental investment, where you're investing in a community to create a healthy residential area, to raise the quality and the standard of living, to provide it with the goods and services that will allow that population to be nourished, nurtured, grow, and develop. Then there are predatory forms of development where your goal is to extract as much wealth as possible from these locations and communities with no regard for the impact that extraction process will have on the people who live and work inside those neighborhoods and communities. And what the concentration of Black people on the East Side with limited options and choices leads to is predatory forms of investment. And that entrapment is based on a racist system of determining housing and residential land values. And I'll just briefly say this, that back in the 1930s, when the society was moving from to a system of mass home ownership as a way of getting past the depression and re-stimulating the economy, the decision was made at that time to make home ownership the American dream, because we hadn't been dreaming about home ownership before then, and to make it the American dream and to transform it into a tool of wealth production. So the big question said, how you gonna do that? How you gonna create mass home ownership? Turn a house, which is a cultural artifact, into a commodity that you're meant to buy and sell for profit. How will you do that? And how will the banking industry know where they should make their investments? So back then, home appraisals, that was a very primitive industry, not well developed at all. So they said, well, we got to figure out, how do we determine what's valuable and what's not valuable. Mm-hmm. How can we determine what will be valuable in the future and what won't be valuable in the future? How will we be able to convince mortgage brokers who weren't thrilled about this idea of mass home ownership to invest millions of dollars in a commodity with the promise that they will get their money back? How are we going to do that? And then how will we protect home investments so that, in fact, people will want to make that kind of, go in that kind of debt, etc. So they said, well, we'll have to figure out a system of determining the value of a house and the value of a residential area. So the two were tethered together, the house and the neighborhood. And the value for one trickled down to the value of the other, depending on, no matter how you looked at it one way or other. Right. And so this guy, Frederick Babcock, he went racist on us. He said, let me tap into the prevailing social norms. And essentially what he did was to say, if there are Black people in a neighborhood and a community, it means that the value is going down. And embedded in that was, if there are no Black people in there, it means the value is going to go up. Now, he did indicate that immigrants would cause value to go down, but not anywhere like Blacks. It's about having a storm versus a hurricane in terms of its impact. So what they did was embed racism in the very way we value land. And it was simple. As the percentage of whites and social class exclusivity increased, housing values went up. And as the percentage of Blacks and social class inclusivity increased, values went down. So the very design of how we attach value to housing meant a structural gap would exist between Black and white home ownership. You can't close that gap. Right. It's impossible. Right. It's impossible. You can never, ever close that wealth gap based on that model. Not in a trillion years. You have to change the whole system. Right. And so everybody bought into it. Everybody bought into it. And they also bought into its running dog, class segregation. Americans love class segregation. They worship at the throne of class segregation. Yeah. They wake up in the morning singing, God bless class segregated America. And then for those low-income whites, they inject them with racism so they can turn them into mad dogs that will protect the elites. That's they will never be Donald Trump.
Talk about it, Dr.
Right.
They know.
Right.
But Donald Trump and the others made them want to be Donald Trump. And to say, if I can't be rich and powerful, and if they don't want me around them, I ain't gonna let nobody else touch me. Even if they tell me I don't have to be a mad dog. I want to be a mad dog protecting the rich and powerful rather than be normal. That's my choice. And that's sick.
Right.
That's really sick. And so when you add that together, we're stuck in these neighborhoods, and that's what opens the door to predators. And they make lots of money. So when we look at substandard housing, we're talking about most Black people, 40, 50, 60% of their income on dilapidated and run-down houses full of rats and roaches and squirrels and everything else, skunks and groundhogs. y'all know,
Right.
all kind of stuff be crawling up into these houses based on living in the vacant lots and coming
Right.
into houses when it gets all cold outside.
Right.
And the high rents and the low maintenance creates
Right.
this enormous gap that allows where profits are made. And the profits are huge and substantial. And the impact on blacks are horrendous. We think that they produce high levels of toxic stress. We think that they're related to the high infant and mortality rates and the low birth rate babies. We think they contribute to hypertension. And we even believe that there's a strong association between the dilapidated quality of the housing in the surrounding neighborhood areas to violence and crime inside of the communities
Sure.
in which we are associated with. There are some studies that are showing that. So, I mean, that issue of substandard housing is a huge issue. Buffalo leads all of New York State in terms of the rate of evictions. Mm-hmm. And so the high levels of neighborhood instability and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And if you ever had kids, you know what a monster it is on kids constantly changing schools and teachers, the constant disruptions in terms of where they live and these types of elements. So the substandard housing is a generator of a number of issues that we have. And the sad part is I know of nothing that the city of Buffalo is doing about that issue. And not only are they doing anything about it, but according to the investigative report, the city has allowed these predatory landlords to accumulate something like $22 million in unpaid housing court fines.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
Oh, my God.
Now, Vicki, you try not to pay a parking ticket and see what happens to you.
Right. No, it is a crazy thing. And I want to say, as you're talking about the health disparities, which it's just amazing. Of course, all these issues are interrelated and interconnected. So I know that you've done a lot of work with the health. And what is it called? The health disparities? Is it a task force or
the African American Health Equity
Task Force. That's what I meant to call it, the Health Equity Task Force. So I know there's an exciting event going on August 12th and 13th that will be, we have it listed, where this is playing. It'll be on the 12th and 13th, and people can find it if they Google Igniting Hope. So it will be at the Jacob School of Medicine?
Yeah, the Jacob.
Yeah, at 955 Main Street, and people can sign up to go to it. I know I'm supposed to be out of town, but boy, it makes me feel like changing my plans if I could. Because it's really, I've been to it many times before. It's just so important. It's so well done. And it's really critical. And when you said health, of course, we know as body, mind, spirit, and we're going to talk about that more in the next show as well, that the mind and the body are so connected. So all the things that trauma and the trauma and the stress and the physical effects all work on people, and they all come unraveling. We didn't even mention the education and jobs issues. But anyway, if you want to just say a little more about the health disparities and the health equity.
I stress that the health disparities directly flows from the issues of substandard housing, the dilapidated and rundown conditions that we find in the neighborhoods, and along with the structural joblessness, these root problems. I don't list the health disparities as one of the central root problems, in part because if we deal with the other issues and how we develop the neighborhoods and communities, we attack the health problems. And I say that in the sense that our research and work shows that the driving force behind health outcomes are not things that happen in the terms of the delivery of healthcare services, but they flow from the social determinants of these health outcomes. And these social determinants are embedded in the neighborhood and the community condition. So our research and work around health-based issues drove us to the centrality of the importance and the significance of attacking these issues down on the ground, and of showing the relationship between these conditions, linear relationship between these conditions and the negative health outcomes that we see, and particularly premature death, which is a reflection of potential lives lost and the kind of tragedy that they have on the African American community and other communities of color. And education is an interesting thing, because one of the things that we found is that while educational attainment is a huge issue, especially the question of literacy and our abilities of our people to be able to read and write and do these things, these are major obstacles and barriers. But something else is going on. I mean, when we look at the job market, we find that 70% of the jobs in Erie County and 65% of the jobs nationally, they don't require a college degree. They don't. And so when we look at that, we realize there is what we call the working class job market. And we eliminate everybody who's vying for a job that requires a college degree. We eliminate them and only look at the working class. Okay. We discovered that this working class job market is bifurcated. At one level, you have the high wage working class jobs, and another level of low wage working class. I mean, when we started to look closely at this, we saw that in all these high income neighborhoods where people were making lots of money, that in a number of these communities, in terms of clearance, 44% of the residents of Clarence, which has the highest medium household income and highest medium house value in all of Erie County, over 40% of the people don't have a college degree. They're workers.
Wow.
And so then we discovered that whites are overwhelmingly concentrated in the high wage working class jobs. And blacks are all concentrated at the bottom of the working class jobs. And they got all kinds of barriers. You can't get in the apprenticeship program. You can't get in this, you can't get in that. And even that silly Northland Training Center that everybody is pretending to be something that it isn't, requires a test to get into the training program. What is this about? You don't need to pass a test to get into a training program. Anything you need to learn, you should be taught while being trained. Then the big secret is that employees prefer workers who have had on-the-job training rather than training in a classroom in a bubble.
Anyway. Yes.
And Northland is a bubble. It's a classroom training. That's not top of the line. Yeah. And so we keep sitting. If you look back, and I got some folks working on this. I'm not going to call them out, but there's some friends of mine who are employed at the county, and we're taking a hard look at this silliness. And we're saying the model that we should be pursuing is on-the-job training. Then there's the nasty truth that Buffalo secretly attempts to do everything to hide. The East Side development I want to say this again. East Side development is nothing more than a big jobs market for white folks. They're the ones that are breaking out the champagne, pouring it all over themselves, lighting up the cigarettes and jumping up and down. Because all those millions that they're spending on these symbolic, make a lot of noise and do nothing projects, the millions and millions, including the billion that the governor keeps harping about. Who do you think will get 90 to 95% of those jobs?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Their businesses are going to be the ones that are getting the contracts.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Their workers are the ones that are going to be in job, and they do this shamelessly. If you looked at the Buffalo News
mm-hmm.
and the picture story that they ran about the opening of Tops, and if you paid attention to what was going on, in the picture, the people working and getting paid to do something were all white. And the people out there moaning and crying and looking at the monuments were black. They were black. And so even y'all know right now, if you drive around the east side,
right.
and you see somebody digging up the sidewalk and laying a pipe, I guarantee you, if it's 10 workers, they either all 10 of them are white or 9 of them are white.
Right.
And one brother standing over there praising the Lord because he won the lottery, he got the job. He was their window dressing. He said, I don't agree with window dressing, but I'm glad I'm the window dressing.
Right. Right.
That's what.
And then when the Buffalo News showed the picture of this guy fixing up the Michigan Street Baptist Church, you're talking about transforming the black community. You got a white guy working. Well, we got double-digit in unemployment, and so. This is the kind of games that they play with us. And this has been going on for years. Like if you look at all of those vacant lots,
right,
the thousands of them on Buffalo's east side, and then you raise the question, who owned the company that tore down the houses? Who were the workers that bulldozed it? Who was driving the trucks that took away the debris?
Right.
Who got the millions and millions and millions of dollars that they spent to tear down all of those houses?
Right. You know.
Right.
They were white. And they got the money.
Right.
And we got these damn vacant lots. You can bleep that on the radio.
Right. No, they
got
won't
the
bleep that.
vacant lots.
There are a few other choice words that could come to mind. But I
they
just
got the money.
You know, one thing before there's so much to talk about. We've only just barely scratched the surface, so I do hope that we're going to have you on again. We still have about, 7-8 more minutes. But one thing this was what Deidra has been wanting us to talk about too, because it's very, I think I'm not putting it on you, but we talked about asking you, what do you think about the Humboldt Pkwy thing also?
Well, the first thing we got to say
is everything you just said. I
Humboldt
put that in there.
It's a short bridge.
Uh-huh.
It's only running from East Ferry to Dodge.
Uh-huh.
So it just covers that area where you dip down low.
Right.
So it's a short bridge. What I think, if you got $1 billion to spend, and if you Google and look at the neighborhoods surrounding the Humboldt Parkway. I think if you invested that $1 billion in the development of these surrounding neighborhoods, and couple that with the building of a strong green infrastructure and noise barriers, you would have a much more dramatic impact on the neighborhood and the community that would tackle root problems. But the problem that we face that is associated with this, in the menu of neighborhood development, we have appetizers, the entree, and then some dessert. And what white folks and policymakers, not the revolutionary white folks, I mean, not white folks like you, Vicki. I mean, white folks like some other people, I'm not going to call their names because then everybody would be mad at me, but they know who they are. People like Palladino and that cohort, those kind of folks. And other people have convinced us, and you hear this in all your one-on-one about neighborhood organization. We have to do things that will give us a quick fix to. In other words, let's get an appetizer. Let's get an appetizer. Let's get an appetizer. And that's at one level okay. But the appetizer became the meal. And for centuries, for decades, all we fight for are the appetizers. We never get to the entree. And that's what all of these symbolic projects, if they were 100% positive, they won't change anything. And then we have come to accept the lies and silly talk as a truism. Why are there no protests to spending $98 million on the Buffalo Central Terminal and the Broadway Market in the second poorest neighborhood in the city? A neighborhood rift with vacant lots and dilapidated rundown houses where the mayor spent millions tearing stuff down and not a dollar to build anything. And then when that man up in that hall chose to spend money, it was on a landmark. No. We have to stop grabbing appetizers. I said, I don't want no appetizer. I ain't eating dessert until after the meal. And that main meal has to be, let's deal with this substandard housing. Fix the housing where people live before you start talking to me about building something new. Fix the sidewalks and the streets. Reconnect the vacant lots to the fabric of neighborhood life. Build us some real institutions that mean stuff. That's what I'm talking about. I want the entry, the main meal. I don't want no more dessert. I don't want no appetizers. And I don't want to drink before I eat. That's the direction I think we have to go.
Deidra.
Yeah.
4 minutes.
Agreed.
We have like 3 minutes. 4 minutes.
Yes, I mean, I think it was just very fitting for Dr. Taylor to just take the time out and express so much great information and connection with what we're looking at, and it's just so true. I just in such agreement. One of the things I'm looking at is this so-called $50 million that Hopewell is getting to give part of this $50 million, only 150 homeowners will get support for what do you call it, for their homes, to build up homes.
Some modeling or something.
People in thousands. That's not even 10%. It's just in thousands of homeowners on the east side, only 150 people would get support in, remodeling their homes and bringing that up. First is shelter. Then once a person's shelter and basic necessities are met, then we can look at a larger picture. But we're always going to worry about our front lawn first, and I love that you said that, as long as you fortify the neighborhoods around the park, this parkway, yes, it's going to really make it better. We want cleaner air. We want greener spaces, but, you're going to put a green space in the middle of the neighborhood where people can't keep their front lawns or their roofs together.
Right.
Right. So, where's the money, to give them these, whether it's low interest loans or grants or whatever it is, support, for people, homeowners, to do what they need to do without slapping them with a, with a petition, not a petition, but a citation.
Right. The fine.
Which we get.
Oh.
And they're not giving us support to fix it. Right. They just give us another fine and another fine until they lose it. So that's a whole nother, ball of wax as far as foreclosures and, that kind of thing. But, I just thank you so much, Dr. Taylor, for being on with us. And we have to do a part 2.
Oh, yes.
I want to say something quickly about this foreclosure.
Very quickly.
For all of these issues. They foreclose, and when they sell the house, they're supposed to give the surplus back to the homeowners. In the vast majority of instances, the homeowners never get that surplus. They keep them. More wealth being extracted from the community.
That's right. That's right.
Just sickening. Just sickening. So, I mean, there's so much, so many more things to be done, and we really didn't get. Well, we talked about what needs to be done, but maybe we need to talk about how it, or what do we need to do to get it done. That could be another part. So we're so grateful, and you are so right, and I'm so grateful for both of you, for all that people, for the time, for the wisdom, for all the inspiration and encouragement, because we have to get it done, and we're going to get it done with, we just are. So all I can say is, this is Talking Peace. Thank you so much. This is Talking Peace, and together we've been talking peace in truth.